James. So
Thanks, James.
the first question I'd like to open up to all the panelists, and there's actually 3 questions with a similar focus. And if we look at the stage gate process, do projects necessarily have to go through all of the stages, especially in the front-end loading? And what if following this rigid process doesn't make you cause to miss an opportunity? For instance, if you look at cell phone technology where it develops quite quickly. And a question that goes with that is, how can you fast track a project and still achieve success, but try and find a balance between following a structured process and still getting the job done quickly enough so that you meet market demands? It's a bit of a mouthful. Anyone up to this one?
So for me, so let me take this. My experience, what I found successful was to loop inside 1 or 2 stages. So in the example of the automakers, if you see that the development starts from macro and then goes to MIDI and micro, so starts first of all from what it is the overall objective of the plant, what type of manufacturing is being produced, is that engines also produced in that same factory or not, that it's a kind of questions at the macro level, what products, what options, and what volumes. When you go down, you go at MIDI level and you talk about the different departments, press, shop, body, paint, assembly, and then you go into the micro level, you go inside each department. So this seems to be very sequential, but we always go one step back and we ask ourselves, is the design of that department, which is now optimized, still be able to meet the 1 level higher targets? So if we are now planning the body shop with a certain availability, is this availability in line with what is the availability expected by the following department, or do we need to put a buffer in between? So these are the questions that are coming up, and therefore we are obliged to move within 2 stages back and forth in circles to make sure that what we have optimized still is able to meet what was the original requirement.
Anybody else wanted to add something to that?
Yes, Davida, I would like Charles. And I would like to say that in philosophy, you have to go through all of the stages. I think Davida has explained it now. The issue is the speed which you go through depends on the type of project. If it's a very standardized project, you go very fast through the pre-feasibility and feasibility, and you go into the planning phase because you use the contractor that will in any case do the lump sum job. If it's a new technology and first of a kind, you go very rigorously through each of them because of the fact that if anything you miss in that stage costs so much more later on in both schedule and capital. So it is not a clear answer. You can go very fast if you can go fast, but if not, don't.
James?
I personally feel that the goal would be to have less stage gates as opposed to more, but to focus on a process that makes it very rare that you don't get through a stage gate. I know, talking to a number of people in other organizations that have multiple stage gates, the team spends the majority of their time trying to guarantee that the project moves forward as opposed to focusing on really managing the job. And a lot of energy is spent trying to justify. And also I see it as a huge breakdown. If you hit a stage gate and are not prepared to move through that, you've already failed. The stage gate is just letting you know that you've failed, but you've failed before that. If you get to a stage gate and your design is advanced to a point that you're over budget, at least in healthcare, you'll spend way more money trying to get back on budget, and you'll end up paying the same amount of money at the end of the day and getting a lot less.
Thank you, Davido. Guys, thanks. So I'm going to stick to the stage gate for a moment. And Davido, this one goes to you on the automotive stage gate, slide 17. When do you involve suppliers in the process? And the question goes to, when do you actually get those supply contracts in place? Is it during design already? Davido?
So the components, we're talking about material suppliers, component suppliers, are those ones that are typically already involved in previous projects, in previous vehicles. A car maker is having a series of key suppliers that are typical supplier or preferred suppliers for a certain type of platform or a certain type of product. Therefore, they are all involved in the initial phase to qualify to be those ones that can then provide those materials. Qualification means that they are expected to participate in a certain phase of co-engineering. So there is this co-engineering concept of the car maker designers that are working together with the components manufacturer for a first concept of what could be the design of a certain component that goes into that car. There will be then a selection after this phase where one of these will be awarded. So there is, let's say, there is no formal agreement and contract signed that this one will be the supplier that goes from A to Z. But it's a certain core team of suppliers. It is always coming into the game when there is to develop a new car. So it's wanted by those suppliers to invest this time, because this could be an optimal opportunity to be involved in the next business.
Thank you, Davido. I think it's very interesting to start seeing the differences in the different industries. We're still on the point where the guys want to fast-track projects. And the next question is, how can standardized designs or modular designs perhaps help to speed up project development? And the question is asked, is that not maybe the pharma secret? And together with that, a different question, but I think it speaks to the same topic, is how could micro design be used in the construction industry?
So let me try with this micro design, maybe. I think what we do in micro design, it's, for instance, to design a workplace. And without going into simulation tools, which I think for me can be helpful, but maybe not in this case, where you need to make feeling a worker that will be working on a perfect and optimal condition and in that workplace. We use mock-ups with cardboards. So we build a one scale model of that workplace where we position all the tools and the prototype of the materials that this person needs to work with and see if that fits. And I think I can imagine the same mock-up can be used also when I am working in a construction yard, that I need to do repetitive things and I need to study that workplace, how to optimize it. And I can use that similar situation, similar way to see if that design can help the construction worker to make his job at best. Sometimes these jobs are taking 2 years and they are kind of repetitive. So to me, it's a bit of a similar situation like you would have in an industry where I'm producing something in series.
Okay, and then just specifically, and maybe Charles, you can quickly talk about the modular design in the oil and gas. Does modular designs help to speed up project development? Standardized modular design.
Absolutely. That what we've heard being done in the other industries is now also being done in the process industry. And many other companies are nowadays building these standardized modules and do that in module yards instead of doing stick build on site. And they're taking off a lot of time and cost from those projects, but you need repetitive projects. In the beginning, it costs more to design and it takes a little bit longer. But once you've done that, the next and the next and the next project picks the fruit of this handsomely. So again, if it's a one of a kind, it's not worthwhile pursuing. But if there's any chance of repeating the process, then it's absolutely worthwhile doing it.
Great, thanks, Charles. James, the next one goes back to your side on healthcare. And I think what interests the guys quite a bit is the whole funding model that you do your funding quite early on. And then I start to think about what I think we may actually address in the next webinar, but maybe you can touch on it today, is if you see a project is going haywire on cost and schedule, how do you track it continuously to be able to take quick enough corrective action? There's the ask you question, maybe you can give an example. And then somebody else also asked, how do you forecast? Do you forecast end of job throughout the project life cycle and end of job schedule? And how do you make sure the risks throughout the project is tracked so that you don't get behind, and going back to this whole tracking process of making sure you're not caught with your pants down on cost and schedule?
It's a good question, or a series of questions. I think we take a very holistic approach to managing the project. We don't really look at it as there's a design phase and then a construction phase. We try to look at it from the beginning of the validation phase through first patient is just kind of a continuous delivery process. So the way we manage the design, one big thing, anything large, we will have the design and construction team under a single contract. So it's not design build. The designers and the contractors will actually sign a single contract for a single dollar amount. And we'll do that right at the end of validation. We will co-locate those folks in a single location. So we may have on a $100 million project, 40 people from 7 different companies doing the design together in a single office. On a big job, it might be 200 people working, literally showing up to work every day as if they're a single company, but they're up to 10 or 20 different companies. Within target value design, we'll absolutely talk about next webinar, is we do continual budget estimating like every week or every 2 weeks. And we're not taking off the entire project, but as the design develops and new details show up, the contractors provide incremental costs, increase or decrease for every design decision that gets made. And so we track to a target. We also break the cost components up into groups that could be called clusters or project implementation teams that will focus on a group of costs and manage the design all the way through. From a projection point of view, everybody that has what we say a profit at risk partner has to report out to all of the other companies in the pool on a monthly basis how their costs are going and what their cost projection is and what their concerns are. We also have a meeting where we review what we call the risk and opportunity log on a weekly or bi-weekly basis with the project managers for all of the main trades and design firms. And the focus on that is on managing risk and coming up with solutions, not blaming people or pointing fingers. So at a high level, that's how we do it. For more detail, this will be a good part of the, at least my piece of the next webinar.
Fantastic. James, I want to stick with you. The charter outline you presented was very interesting in that it's a high-level document, very specific information, but concise. Is this something you progressed to over the years? Because many times, project charters become a cut and paste exercise. People take an old charter and they just cut and paste information, and it's almost a useless, very lengthy document. Have you evolved to this? What made you get to the point where it's concise and clear?
A couple of things. We had a number of breakdowns where any new process comes from. the other thing is that we found that the more lengthy it is, the people don't read it. So it has been an evolution, and I would say it's still in its early stages for us. We're more clear around the stakeholders and the scope in and out. The early definition of metrics, I think we have a ways to go on. But at the end of the day, it's become a more abbreviated document to get our senior leadership to actually read it and agree to it.
Thank you. Thanks, James. There was a question around framing, and Shoal, maybe I can direct this one to your side. It was mentioned that framing meetings often are very difficult because you've got different stakeholders having very different views, and discussions may get stuck where they just carry on and on and on, harping on a difference, where you may have to break these away, stop the session, have smaller breakaways, etc. And this is especially an issue in joint ventures and public participation projects. And one of the remedies could be a very good facilitator. Shoal, in your experience, what's your view on this? So this was more a comment rather than a question. I'd like to get...
I think it's an excellent comment, and thank you for that. Framing is a mindset game, and you need a mindset facilitator. It is not a technical review, and it is not just going through the paces. It is really getting people to have what I call mental model alignment. So you have to change the mental model in people's minds, and this is more of a psychologist's job than an engineer's job. So yes, the quality of the facilitator is absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Shoal. Then I'm getting to the very last question, and a very interesting one. And I'm going to pose this to all three panelists. Have any one of you been involved on a project that was actually stopped for a good reason? The person that asked the question said, well, typically, projects carry on and carry on. Everybody knows it should be stopped, but nobody does it. Have any one of you experienced a project that has been stopped for a good reason?
I can give one example. This is James. I worked on a project where we actually own a building that's on one of our hospital campuses. It's about 100,000 square foot building, and we own it. And so we wanted to, we have a number of private doctors in there, and they were moving out. So we wanted to renovate the building and make it into a complete clinic. And so we did some early numbers, cost per square foot. This is how much it costs to build medical. We got in through the feasibility stage, made a lot of sense. So we advanced into the validation phase. And once we got the engineers on board, we figured out that there were some major issues with the way the fire exiting worked, something that was acceptable by with this 4-story atrium and the way the smoke would get evacuated, which had significant cost. We had accessibility improvements to this parking garage that added a significant amount of cost. We found out we didn't have enough cooling capacity, so we had to replace this chiller that was at the end of its useful life. And the new chiller was going to weigh too much, so we had to add steel to the building. We found out when we started working up there, we should probably replace the roof. And the elevators also were not big enough, so we were looking at, okay, we need to change the size of the elevators. So long story short, at the end of the validation phase, we came back and said, in order to actually do this, our initial feasibility numbers were wrong because we didn't know about all these infrastructure issues. We provided the validation study to senior leadership, and the project died. And I would actually consider that a successful validation effort. We found that we could not build the product within a budget that made sense to the organization, and the project got put on indefinite hold, and to my knowledge has not moved forward. Now, typically we would have funded it, in our previous life, we would have funded it and we would have been halfway through design. We would have hit a design development stage gate. We would have spent a couple $1 million, and we would have found that the project was over budget, and we would have made the decision then, but we would have had to write off a couple of $1 million, so it would have been much harder. In this case, we spent about $200,000, and the organization just wrote off that piece, and yeah, the project never moved forward.
Davida, yes, I was also involved in a project in Secunda. Sits in the catchment area of water catchment area of the Johannesburg area of the whole Gauteng water supply. So it's very sensitive to any potential pollution into rivers. And in Secunda, the process cooling water was always a big problem because there was a slight imbalance and it was building up, and there was lots of alternatives looked at to solve that. During that stage, our technology people supplied the technology for the gasification system in Beulah, North Dakota, and they developed a new process cooling system for that facility, which looked very lucrative. I was pulled off from operations. I was operating the wastewater plant at that stage and formed part of the task force, and we spent 18 months looking at changing Secunda's process cooling water system to that similar system that is currently operational and successful in Beulah. After pre-feasibility, we thought we had a go, and after feasibility and the risk review thereafter, we saw too many, very similar to this thing discussed now, too many risks in the infrastructure changes, and that was shelved after lots and lots of sweat and tears and cut. It was never looked at again.
Thank you. So the key message is get your facts, and like James said, the validation studies.
Let me add one other example, different industry. So I must say that 70% of the project I've been working on were in danger. So I was there to rescue the project actually. And one in particular that was quite interesting because it was to build a factory to produce rare earth magnets for wind turbine generators. It was a completely new technology. It was a joint venture with another partner. It was a strategic investment, and I've been called when this project that was expected to cost a certain amount of money was budgeted for 3 times so much. And the top management was absolutely scared and unsure if they were going to go on or not. So we've been helping with the team and also learning a lot on our side about this new technology and what are the levels or the ways to reduce the scope, to understand better the scope, and also to reduce the risk. One clear evidence was that in the company, rather a big company, when somebody heard about production of magnets, added more and more type of magnets. So everybody that was hearing that the company was going to invest in such a facility was finding a market, a potential market. So the scope in terms of product mix exploded literally. That is one of the reasons why this investment was also 3 times the budget. Second, due to uncertainty of the technology and the low competence on that, people were doing or building a lot of contingency, a lot of redundancies into the process. So at the end of the story, we managed to de-risk the project in a way that we have suggested to do a modular design in order to start small, see how the market develops, and then add the different additional capacity modules. That was the final recommendation. I think if I look now in the press, this plant has never been built. So eventually that has been other decisions, the strategic changes in the company that decided to kill that project. It was a very interesting study.
Thank you, Davida. Guys, thank you to the participants for really great questions. Back to you, James.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. We look forward to seeing you on October 25th, where we'll go into the next phase of a project looking heavily at design. Please go ahead and share this information with others, and we wish you luck in your projects. and talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Also
you.
from my side.
Bye.